everybody. I see Leslie and Diana and Carol. And if you guys can both hear us and see us, let us know and we'll get started. It does take a little bit of them. Oh, all the way from Boston. Wow. I wonder if did you go to the Boston Veg Fest, Leslie? All right, we'll just wait a second, Lani. Just I like to make sure that they can actually hear us. I want to make sure I can hear you, Lani.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. Okay. So guys, let us know that you're there and we'll get started. I know that there's people there because I can see the numbers. Hi. Hi, Maureen says she can hear. Hi, Maureen. Hi, Tracy. Hi. Perfect. So let's get started. All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome to Healthy Living Live. I'm Chef AJ, and my guest today is Lani Muelrath. She is the author of this new book, The Mindful Vegan, and she's also the author of, I can always want that word, Quick Fit Quickies is the hardest book title to say.
I know, it's kind of scary.
And hi, Jennifer Dyson and Plant-Based Journey. So please welcome Lani. Say thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Yes, and thank you so much. I'm so excited about this opportunity, and I know there are a lot of people looking forward to us both being here together, so I'm honored.
Uh-oh. All right. So mindfulness. This has not been done really very much in the plant-based movement.
No, it hasn't, and actually one of the drivers behind this book is, actually I see it as a project, because I don't know, AJ, any of the many books out there about mindful eating. There are a lot of them, but not a one of them that I could find addressed eating mindfully in its most fundamental way. Like, what is on your plate? Who is on your plate? How did it get there? What are the qualities it carries for not only your health, but the well-being of our planet and the well-being of the beings that we share her with? They all seem to be like, as long as you're, eating in an appropriate environment and are chewing your food a certain number of times, that's what's important. But I think really the fundamental thing is looking at the ethics of what is on your plate and then springboarding from there.
I agree, because a long time ago, I took a mindful eating class with somebody that clearly wasn't plant-based, and the foods that she used were Hershey Kisses and potato chips. And the idea is like to meditate and contemplate these foods and eat them mindfully. And I'm like, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to learn how to eat crap mindfully.
Now, isn't that funny? Yeah. I think she had to do separate from their fear of food. I don't know. But that's kind of thinking. Yeah. How are we being mindful with this? So
yeah. How did you get interested in this, in mindfulness?
Well, I have been practicing this form of, it's a practice, a meditation practice, and all approach you bring to your daily thing that I started 25 years ago. I had been meditating for maybe 15 or 20 years before that. It wasn't this particular form of study. And what it did for me was it really brought me a level of having less reactivity in my life. It taught me how to eat mindfully in the way that connects me with my natural hunger and fullness signals, so that I could turn the job of that over to my body instead of always micromanaging with my, as a career dieter, I tended to micromanage that all from my head. So that all came together so beautifully for me and ended up eventually allowing me to let go of 40 to 50 extra pounds because of connecting with my natural signals and the ability then to navigate life's ups and downs more skillfully because of this practice.
Yeah. Well, less reactivity sounds like something that would be very worthy, especially for those of us that live in stressful places like Los Angeles.
Well, we all live in reactivity. I actually give a really simple definition. Mindfulness, that would be probably good for start conversation. Would you like me to do that?
Absolutely.
Mindfulness is a particular form, a specific form of mental training, and it's a particular kind of awareness that you bring to your daily activities. So there's two avenues. Now together, these lead to varying things. One is reduction in reactivity. Day is just responding a knee-jerk reaction to one thing or another. And it also leads to the cultivation of positive brain states. That means equanimity, kindness, compassion. They're all there within us. They've just been heaped over by our overactive, busy, wandering minds.
What's the difference between mindfulness and, say, just meditation?
It is a form of meditation that actually specifically helps you create space between where our thoughts usually go, running with every story and idea that comes into our minds. So what you do is you learn to create a space around that so that you're not being hijacked by every thought that comes around. And you do that by focusing on some concentrated training with concentration, where you learn to create that space between stimulus and response, and making a more skillful choice. And then from the formal meeting, you take your daily activity. And it really is, because with mindfulness practice, with the meditation that I teach in the Mindful Vegan, you're doing little things with your brain, with your mind, that make big changes in your brain. And this can really lead to really large changes in improving your life experience.
So in other words, would you say that all meditation is a form of mindfulness, but not all mindfulness is actually meditation?
Actually, there are so many forms of meditation, and some of them use like a phrase or a word or a mantra to repeat, and these can be all very calming and relaxing. And I tell people, if there is some practice that you are doing helps you connect you with more equanimity, with being more authentic in your life and moving out of reactivity, then for heaven's sake, keep studying that. If you've lost touch with it, pick it up and take it up again. At the same time, if you're looking for something else or want to try something that gets under the surface a little bit deeper, then why not try this practice? That's why I set it up as a 30-day plan, and I teach it step by step. As you know, AJ, I taught 6th grade for like 20 years, still teach at level. Used to taking a complex and taking it apart into step-by-step increments so that you can build upon skills one day upon another. That's why I've got the 30-day plan. That's why I've recorded 30 audios to support that you can download for free from my website. It tells you exactly in the book where to do those. I also just completed a virtual retreat when you pre-ordered 4 days. It was a bonus gift, and we went through the first 4 days together, and it was phenomenal. It turned out, and such excitement about, I wanted people getting going. That's another desire behind daily, step-by-step, not just, here's a good idea, maybe someday I'll do this. No, here's how you can start now in little pieces.
So I want to post a link. Is your website just your name? Because I'll post it right now if people want to download those.
Lani
Perfect. Okay. So there it is, guys.
It's also the mindfulveganbook.com that gets you to the same place, as does the plantbasedjourney.com. My books kind of bring you into this place for a landing. So
nice. Very nice.
Thank you for doing that.
Oh, sure. We have a few comments from your fans. Liv says she loves your book and enjoys your meditations. Nancy says she's working with you and meditates every day, Liz. Sometimes more than once. So that's terrific.
Hi, Nancy.
So are you sort of a lifelong meditator? Because I'm sort of new to meditation, but I can see the benefits already.
I am very excited. When I saw that you took the mindfulness stress reduction, is that what you took?
I took the class.
Is that what engaged in?
Believe it or not, I was diagnosed with IBS in November of 2014, and I was sent by my GI doctor at UCLA to a mindfulness course because I mean, stress can play a role in almost all diseases, but especially with GI disturbances, and that was one of the treatments, and it was just a fabulous course. I interviewed the teacher, who was a nurse named Suzanne Smith, and you can find that on my website. But I really love the whole idea of it,
And what a progressive doctor you had to recommend that you find that connection. And this brings out one of the important connections between this mindfulness meditation practice that the BSR originated by Jon Kabat-Zinn, who was kind of the grandfather of bringing mindfulness meditation practice to our country. And that program, as you probably know, is now in hundreds of hospitals, probably in thousands now, across the world, because of its ability to help with stress reduction, even down to results from psoriasis. As we know, that skin outbreaks of psoriasis is stress related, having to do with cravings, addictions, anxiety, all kinds of stress disorders. It's just because it's science-based, and that's what I did in the Mindful Vegan. As you know, I've got it all, there's over 300 references in there because I'm an academic, and I do know how science supporting that have been so beneficial to people, including myself. So right. I'm glad to see that you had a doctor that recommended that and that you took up this study. And I guess you would say a lifelong, if I started 45 years ago but it's the last 25 years I've done this process, this particular kind of mindfulness meditation that made such a difference in, remember I talked about using reactivity? Of our lives and our day is reacting rather than responding, and we aren't even aware of it. And when you take the time to do just a few minutes of formal practice at getting some degree of mastery over our habits of thinking, how we run with this and run with that, it starts to become very apparent to you how, as you move through your day, this reactivity is causing misery for you. It really does create a lot of problems for us. So that's been so implemented, making changes in daily lives.
Well, how long does it take to reach enlightenment? That's what I want to know.
Well, here's the thing. Remember, this is called a practice, not a perfect. Right. So the whole idea behind the practice is, you know how people, I can't meditate. As I sit down, I'm on the place. I can't sit still. Have you ever heard that? I'm sure there's a bunch of people on with us today. Well, here's the thing. This is what's happening with our minds all the time. We're just not aware of it because we're either distracted with other things, we're busy running away from mental discomfort, or we are being hijacked by our thoughts. And usually, this takes us in one or two places, into the past or into the future. And this would be a good place to walk into right now to give people a solid idea of how these practices help. You want to go there?
Absolutely. I'd like to give people some advice on just how to get started.
Exactly. I can do, let me give it how the science of it works, and then we can do a little bit about how to get started and a takeaway tool exactly for today. Perfect. So some of the research has been done just recently out of Yale University, was undertaken to see what's the correlation between wandering mind, or our habit of just following whatever comes up in our mind during the course of the day, which most of us do and aren't aware of it, and happiness, or our degree of feeling good about ourselves. And the research study was undertaken in this fashion. They had over 5,000 people over aged 18 to 83, over 80 different kinds of employment or occupation. So it was a pretty wide spectrum. And all these people were given an app. And by the way, I go through the in-depth in the Mindful Vegan, so instructive. They were given an app on their phone where they were randomly pinged in the day, and they were asked to respond very quickly to 3 questions. The first question is, what are you doing? The second question is, what are you thinking about? And the third question is, what is your mood or mood state or your level of happiness? And here's what they found out. 2 very important things from this study emerged. And they had over now 500,000 responses to this survey. They discovered that over 50% of our day we are spending in wandering mind, or our minds are wandering. And that means that a good deal of the time, 50%, we are either thinking back into the past, rehashing something that happened, coulda, woulda, shoulda, regretting something we said yesterday, if only I, that, and ruminating over that. And the other half is projecting, like what if this, catastrophizing. This is not the same as like planning for a job interview. This is like going over and over in your mind, something that just creates more anxiety, and we've all had that. So 50% of our time is spent like this. And they found that also in the brain, that while this wandering mind, this state that you create, actually has a name now by neuroscientists. It's called the default mode network. So when we're not concentrated on something in specific and our minds are wandering, even if we're talking to someone and You know how sometimes your mind goes off, maybe you're not interested in it, who knows where you are. But when you switch off this switch into the default mode network, and this is a positive because this wandering mind tends to hook into neural activity. That's activity in our brains that pulls you into the same parts of our brain where exist stress, cravings, anxiety, addictions, obsessions. So this presents a thought, is it possible that by not getting some degree of mastery over our habits of thinking, we're just moving into excessive rumination? That means thinking too much about the past, which leads us to these negative brain states. And this is why the practice of mindfulness, where you are learning how to not be hijacked by your brain, by thoughts that come into your brain every minute of the day, when you do this in formal training, you become skilled at it. So during the rest of the day, you can be more focused. And I want to add one more thing about this study. This study also told us, remember I said people were asked 3 questions. What are you doing? What are you thinking about? And how happy are you? Or what's your measure of happiness? They found without exception that people were far happier when they were focused on what they were doing, even if it was something they didn't especially like. So for example, if you're doing the dishes, yeah, that's pretty amazing. You're doing the dishes and you really don't like doing the dishes. So you think maybe if I fantasize Hawaii or last summer in Italy, that I'll be happier. But actually it leads to decrease in positive brain state. Now, this doesn't mean you have to learn to love doing the dishes, but it gives us information about simply doing what you're doing while you're doing it. And this opens up more equanimity and more calm and internal happiness and peace. And then you can choose whether it's time to do the task, it might need to play the next, rather than just being jerked around by who knows. Who knows?
That's actually really fascinating because I've been a multitasker as long as I can remember. I can remember being in grammar school and coming home from school and doing my homework while watching TV and talking on the phone. And that's the exact opposite of paying attention, focusing on one task at a time,
It does dilute your attention, and the important message here is whether that impacts your productivity in those different avenues. It apparently leads to a diminishment in our natural capacity for equanimity and happiness and compassion. So it creates an agitation that it's nice to be able to engineer out of our lives just a little bit with practice.
Right. I wish people would hear this message because living in LA, I had a near car accident today, which wasn't my fault. And it was interesting because I had just finished my 30-minute meditation and I was all blissed out. And then this guy was speeding and almost hit me. Just the adrenaline and the stress. And I'm thinking like, God, it's almost like it undid all, the good of the meditation. But you look around, at least in LA, and people are driving and they're eating and drinking or eating, drinking and smoking and talking on the phone. And you're driving. I mean, to me, like when you're driving, you should be driving, like.
It would be nice because look, we know that there's a huge percentage of accidents now caused by the texting, by the multitasking. But you brought something that's really important here, and that is this ability to, as I teach it through the book, and it sounds like similar to what you are practicing because of your training, of getting beneath the surface of this mental activity is actually will keep you then able to be more present in these stress situations. You need to have a stress response in an accident because that's the time you want to leave the car veer towards you. You don't want to just be coming towards you. You want to be actually present so that you can most skillfully respond. And you brought up another important point is people think, well, if I do this meditation, then my mind's going to quiet down and then I'll have this, like you said, this beat out feeling. But actually that can be a false expectation because I sit daily in formal practice and I will have times when it seems like it must be my first day of doing this because 5 minutes into it, I'll figure out, well, where have I been? Where are you now? And bring it back. But it has the same measure of impact on the rest of my day because what I've done is what's central to this practice, and that is bringing your attention back to the moment. That's why we focus on feelings of the breath, because right now you can't breathe for yesterday, you can't breathe for tomorrow. So there's nothing magical about the breath except for that. It brings you here, right now.
I think it's really important.
So a tool that, please finish.
No, I was going to say, I think what you're saying is really important, and I would love to inspire more people to do it, especially plant-based people and stressed people. But I find it's the hardest piece of the puzzle, that I think health of sort of like a three-legged stool. We've got the food part, which you addressed in one of your books. We've got the fitness part, which you addressed in another one of your books. And now we have, the spiritual part, or whatever you want to call it, mindfulness. And I find that even in the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, we deal a lot with the food, especially if they aren't eating the correct diet, and we do a pretty good job teaching that. And Jean-Pierre does a pretty good job motivating people to move. But it just seems that, except for you and maybe Dean Ornish, nobody's really, at least in the plant-based movement. There are people in the larger community that are it seems like this is the easiest piece to fall by the wayside, that everybody's so busy, and that if they have to take time, they'll take it to maybe eat the right food and maybe get a little exercise, but that to make time for a practice is just overwhelming to most people. And that's why I thought if you could, how do you start?
Yeah, well, you bring up a really important point, and that is that trilogy, which is the food and the fitness and the frame of mind. That was my situation, because for a long time, I thought I was hopelessly addicted to sweets. I must be a food addict and all of that, because even though I hadn't in physical education, I certainly knew what to do with exercise. I had studied, since I became a vegetarian 45 years ago, nutrition, so I certainly knew what was kind of the healthier foods to eat. But I couldn't figure out why I was driving around town eating chocolate bars. So, and mindfulness practice is what allowed me these ups and downs of life that I would just be in reaction to, that would undercut my progress in all these realms, and also help me connect more with my body's signals of hunger and fullness, which this kind of practice does, so I can get out of career. So the way you start, and we takeaways for right now, and in the Mindful Vegan book, I tell you from day one exactly a simple way to put your body in position, to find your anchor point at the breath, because that's your point of concentration, to set your intention of having a formal practice for 1 minute or 10 minutes, whatever your plan is for that day. So you kind of cut down on the negotiations, like, isn't it time to, if you just do formal practice when you're in the mood, you never learn how to do things like this when you're not in the mood. So we want to train that part of our brain. And then also very important with that is to have the intention of being there with kindness, patience, and non-judgment. Because it's not uncommon for people to go, oh, I can't do this. Oh, there it goes again. Oh, and you're just practicing blame and shame and judgment. So you want to, and what you practice grows stronger. So you want to practice those very things that you want to cultivate in your daily life. And then it's simply, this practice in its formal steps is simply doing that over and over again. It's bringing your attention back, because this is where you start to train your mind to be able to have a little bit over our habits of thinking. For getting started right away today, I wanted to suggest a real simple 4-step system that I really elaborate upon in the Mindful Vegan, and that's called STOP. Shall we talk about that real quick?
Would you mind me just
kind of a nice acronym?
Absolutely, but I just like to include our viewers to tell you what they're saying every now and then, because Bella and Melinda are saying that mindfulness is definitely the hardest part for them. And we have a question from Lynn. If you could please explain what you meant by equanimity.
Equanimity is it's the ability to be present in a situation without being hijacked by our reactivity, so that when something happens, can make a more skillful choice in response. And some people think it sounds like you're being passive, like, oh, I'm just calm, oh, I'm just, like you were saying, blissed out. And actually that is not it at all, because with mindfulness practice, since you get under the surface of our agitation of the brain, you learn to be able to respond more skillfully in situations. You can still be very forceful very strong, but you take a bit of our knee-jerk reactivity out of it. Does that help?
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's that good? Okay.
Absolutely.
Was there another question that came up?
Well, I want you to talk about your stop, but first you had said about waiting until you feel like it. I think if we wait till we feel like meditating or exercising or eating right, for most of us, we're never going to do it.
Exactly right. It's you can't just rely on your mood, because our mood and even motivation is fickle. All of us have been to some kind of an event where we got all fired up either about how we were going to eat and how we were going to exercise, and then 2 days after we got home, we go, wait, what was I thinking? What was I doing? And that is where the mindfulness practice, it helps you notice that about yourself. You learn so much about your patterns of thinking and how you can undercut yourself by old habits of thinking. And it allows you to get in there under the surface and make a difference at the deepest levels. And the real important thing is then, how do you bring this to your... I'm a firm believer in the formal practice, because without training time to navigate these tendencies of our mind and to actually notice them, then how can you step into daily life and be able to transfer that into actual experience? So the formal practice makes a big difference with that. And the stop system is a tiny little thing you can slip in actually in 5 or 6 seconds any point during the day. And this STOP stands for, okay, and this doesn't mean you have to be in a crisis point. It doesn't mean you have to be in the mood for it. You can even leave cues for yourself, like, oh, stop. Here's what you do, stop. T is just take a breath. So what did we already talk about taking the breath? It brings you into the moment, into the present, especially the feeling of the breath. A lot of, as you see in the Mindful Vegan, a lot of it is connecting with the physical sensations of the breath. Week 2, we go into physical sensations of the body, which gives you so much information about your emotional state, your reactivity. And then week 3, we step into sensations, emotions, because we can feel our emotions, right? Who doesn't know what anger feels like, what courage feels like? We know what those feels like. So actually find a new way to navigate those instead of being to them. So take a breath, feel the breath coming in and out. This brings you right into the present. Now, O stands for observe. Observe, what does my body feel like now? What my emotional state? And then analyze. Don't try to figure it out. Just, what is it? Am I feeling calm? Am I nervous? Am I ruminating about something? Does my body feel discomfort? Is there a knot in my gut, a knot in my throat? Do I feel butterflies? You know, just observe, because that all takes place in the present moment. Any physical sensations with emotion or even just in the body are in the present moment. And then P is speed. Now move forward with of awareness of being present, a little bit of awareness of that memory of there is some degree of choice with how I move forward. And Viktor Frankl said, and I opened the Mindful Vegan with this, he said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And there is a choice, and in that choice lies our freedom. So what we are doing with this practice is creating more room in that space so that we can live more skillfully. So stop, take a breath, observe, and see.
I love that you mentioned Viktor Frankl, because at one time somebody had asked me in an interview that if I could have met anyone, if I could have dinner with anyone, present or past, in my whole life, who would I like to meet? And a lot of people were saying Oprah and the president. And I actually said Viktor Frankl, because I think his book, Man's Search for Meaning. That. Yeah, well, he, in case, because we have a lot of young people that possibly watch this, and not everybody may not know who Viktor Frankl is, but he was a psychiatrist who was in the concentration camps during in Nazi Germany and witnessed his whole family being killed in front of him. And he wrote this incredible book called Man's Search for Meaning, which basically says it's not so much what happens to us, but our response to it that makes a difference. And I thank you for mentioning him, because I just gives me goosebumps, because I love that man. I've never met him, but his work is
I did too. And I read that book in high school. My mom had it on her shelf. And so it sounds like your reading of that book goes way back too. And what a testing testing ground for equanimity. He had.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, we have these wonderful, comfortable lives with plenty to eat and lots of freedom, most of us. So, yeah.
That's incredible.
Advisement.
You had mentioned that the wandering mind a minute ago, you gave examples of it, but is that similar to what a lot of people call the monkey mind? You ever heard that expression?
Yeah. Which is jumping all over the place. And we think that that's just the way it is. And it's very enlightening to find out that though the mind have that tendency, it's the mind's job is to think, is to be on the lookout for to discern the sticks from the snakes. And it's actually that wandering mind capacity is an important evolutionary function because we need to be alert to danger. But it's become a runaway problem for us because we don't always need to be on alert for danger, that kind of danger. So we learned that we can appreciate as a function, but wouldn't it be nice if we could come and go from that quality of thinking a little more at will so we're not at the mercy of it? Yeah?
Yep. How do you think these impair our ability to be in the present moment?
Now I'm talking about when I call AJ and we're having a focused conversation. I think you're talking about probably social media, meandering through social media.
That, like I'm very new to texting, and I said I would never text, and I swore I wouldn't. But when my iPhone broke a year ago, and I had to teach in Mexico, it was either get an iPhone or wait a week and not have a phone. And so while I do text, I have all my alerts. I don't get a beep, except for my husband. I have it set that if my husband wants to get a hold of me, either by a phone or text, it rings. But it doesn't for anybody else. And I'm with people in life, and it's like, I treat my texts like I do email. I get to them when I get to them, but these other people, it's just like all day they're eating, they're watching. They're never off their phone, and they wake up like this and they go to bed like this. And I'm wondering that as good as meditation and mindfulness is for our brain, I can't imagine being this addicted to technology is good for us.
That is such an excellent point because it really touches in on which I was talking about, wandering mind, unhappy mind. First thing is I want to congratulate you at exerting some degree of mastery over how much respond, what's coming in on your device, because it could be never ending. And some people, as you just described, are hooked on this never-ending incoming scrolling through feeds. It's like a little dopamine hit every single time. And Judd Brewer, who is an expert in mindfulness and addictions, and has done a lot of research that I quote in the book, and I also interviewed him for The Mindful Vegan. He talks about this a little bit, how we're getting this constant input. So that's one problem. Here's the other thing. This urge to scroll through like social media feed or see who sent you an email or all of that, besides that little dopamine hit, is also let yourself go this wandering mind. It's almost wandering mind on support. Maybe everyone is here with us today. Who ever noticed that when you kind of start, maybe you're a little bit lost or bored, or you just got to get back because you're so used to this, and maybe you've never even analyzed it before. But after a while of just going through, try to notice if maybe there isn't a little bit of sadness that starts to come up. I noticed that. If I check what's going on in social media, if I spend too much time at it, I start this kind of sadness. I think that is where I talked about if you're spending too much time in wandering mind. These are designed on distraction. That's their fundamental design. You want this, you don't want that. You want this, you don't want that. But if you spend too much time in there, remember it hooks neural activity where reside cravings, anger, obsessions, sadness. So try to notice if you're a person that, you're trying to maybe break free a little bit or maybe not, see if there's some connection between this just going with the urge to do that and your mood state. Good question. That's so prevalent in our culture today.
Well, how can incorporating a daily mindfulness practice help people with addictions, whether it's food or cell phones or alcohol or tobacco? How can that help? Because that's what I'm really interested in.
Yes. Yes, okay. And I also I talked about Judd Brewer a minute ago, and he has done some actual research that I detail in the Mindful Vegan. That's a really good example, and that is on smoking cessation. Do we have time to just do a brief review of that?
Absolutely.
Good. Even though my book isn't about smoking cessation, I do address cravings and addictions. And this particular study is so powerful because we all agree that smoking is an addiction. That is not up for debate, right?
Right.
So what happened is in this particular study on smoking cessation, they took 3 groups who wanted to stop smoking. They all were smoking 20 or more cigarettes a day and were desirous of letting go of that. So it's not like people were being forced against their will. And they were broken into 3 groups, the control group where nothing, just try it on your own or don't try to quit. But the other 2 groups are what's really important. One was given the American Lung Association's gold standard, which is the Freedom from Smoking program. And the Freedom from Smoking program is based on that. It's your usual behavior modification thing to like avoid triggers, use substitutes. For example, for smokers, they were told, if you start to get a craving, well, first, avoid triggers. And yet for smokers, many of the triggers are something good happened, like you had a good meal. Okay, let's not do that anymore. Or you had a fight with your boss. Okay, we won't have those anymore. Or even neutral, like just getting in your car, because many smokers will have an association of a location with falling a cigarette. Then if they came up, then they were instructed to use a substitute. So instead of smoking, eat carrots, eat cookies, eat sunflower seeds, something. And then the loop would be reinforced, but you wouldn't be smoking. So I guess you could be maybe making your choice. Our group was given this training, and exactly like I teach in the Mindful Vegan book, where they spend formal designated time each day with getting some degree of mastery over their habits of thinking. They were given the tools for how to then move this into daily life, how to make the transfer of that training to daily life. Both of these groups bring the same amount of support, the same support materials in home, like audios. And here's what happened. 17 weeks after treatment, those in the mindfulness training group were twice as successful as smoking cessation as those in the Freedom from Smoking program from the American Lung Association. And in the book, I describe where the intervention is, and here's, because this gets to your question too, that as cravings or which is a precursor often in addictions, as these arise, this is where the mindfulness training gives you a whole new approach to the problem. You start to learn, as the smokers did, that cravings actually have a feel in your body. And instead of suppressing it, being with it by use substitute, you learn, because you've been doing it in formal practice, how to navigate these sensations in your body of which things have given rise to. We notice that, as in all emotions, after a few seconds, if you stay with them, don't push them away, don't ignore them, don't suppress them, don't wish they weren't there, that they actually dissolve, and then you're on to something else. So by becoming, and this is really critical to it, because when someone like myself came off of so years of career diet and having so much fear in the healthiest foods, because I was so programmed to control my food and eating, because heaven forbid, I've got to get rid of these pounds, of course, not realizing every time I rebounded at a higher weight when I did. But that helps you navigate whether you're happy, whether you're sad, whether you're anxious, can find where that, be present with that in a way that allows you relationship so it does not control you. And this is where equanimity, to answer that previous question, then becomes a player. It doesn't mean you're always happy. It doesn't mean you're always in the mood to follow through on the right thing. It means you are learning and practicing. You're not perfect at it every time. Called a practice, not a perfect. That you can implement often to great result in your daily life.
Nice. Excellent. I love that you interviewed Dr. Ornish for your book. So tell us a little bit about that, because that's one of my favorite things. I mean, he's the one that really does believe in meditation, and he uses that in his treatment of his heart patients, right?
I know. I'm so glad you brought that up, and I was just emailing him with him this morning. For those who don't have a copy of the book yet, I was able to interview Dr. Ornish in the preparation for this book, for the Mindful Vegan, because I knew this about the Ornish program. I knew that it was holistic in nature. It wasn't just food. It was also exercise, induction, and meditation, and relaxation, and self-care, and all these things that obviously with my triage of books are interesting to me. And so he was so generous to me, and I went to his offices in Sausalito near San Francisco, and immediately he gave me copies of all the books, and he gave me a copy of one that I've never heard of. It's called Love and, well, I don't want to take time to go get it. Love and Survival. Right. But in that, he said, he's been meditating. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you know about this. He has actually been meditating. He started about the same time I did. And he came from a place in his life where he was actually suicidal and depressive, and his outer ambitions were not going to bring him peace and happiness. They would bring him worldly success and a certain degree of joy of living, of course. But he understood that it needed to be interconnectivity. And he said to me, day 30 is actually based on our conversation. And I am so glad you are doing a book meditation, because it's different for people in implementing these healthy practices that we're talking about. And he also said, I am so glad that you are telling people that this happiness and joy and compassion are not things that we need to reach outside of ourselves to get. They are within us. And as we simply become better at navigating our natural capacity for these wondrous states, they become more activated in our life. So I am made a difference in just tied the book together beautifully, and he was so very kind and generous to me. So all honors to Dean Ornish.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about, I guess I'm thinking consistency, because when I started meditating, one of the teachers said that the best meditation is the one you'll actually do. So it's better to meditate every day for 5 minutes than to go on one of these 10-day silent retreats once a year and then not meditate the other 50 weeks. And I find that I see the same thing with people trying to incorporate a plant-based diet or a healthy lifestyle. Like I work at True North occasionally, and I'll see the same people come every year to fast, and they come back often sicker and heavier. And so they're doing great while they're there, but then they're not doing anything when they get home. And I have certain friends that do this 2-week silent meditation retreat every year, but then they're not meditating the other 50 weeks. So could you talk a little bit about why it's important to do these things consistently, even if you're not doing them a lot and perfectly, rather than just once a year trying to, you can't just meditate for 2 weeks and then say, I'm done. And you can't just eat healthy for 2 weeks or fast for 2 weeks and say, I'm done.
No,
right?
It's like saying you'll do leg exercises for a week out of the year and have the strength to climb the mountain. You need to cultivate the very qualities that you bring into your life. And this is what's called a practice, and why I really just said that a little bit of time on a regular basis is preferable to intermittent. And our whole conversation has underscored that. Because if our habit is to run with wandering mind, to hook the neural activity that causes us to do that, then how can we have a lick of chance if we just a couple days or a couple weeks out of the year, which most people don't have time for anyway, for that to amend this habit we have? It's very important that with a daily practice, even of just a few minutes, you starting to really conduct a kind of training of thinking that allow you to create that space that Frankl was talking about, and expand that space so that you can have more joy in your life and more actual mastery over what your results are by not running so much with everything. So it's just like anything else. It has to practice. If you want to game in anything, it needs to be really practiced. It's like a muscle. And it's not, you might need a little bit of some way to organize your schedule so you get the time in. And you made up an important point. When you do it is the time. There's no magic time to do this every day. But if you can set aside and find a place to fill with this practice, then this is what's going to benefit you, whether it's shorter, but regular is most important. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I find that it wasn't until my husband Charles joined me that I was really able to commit to doing it every day. And now we look forward to it. And Bailey, our dog, meditates with us.
So you have a buddy.
I have. It's just like when I was first starting to exercise, I had to have a fitness buddy. And I find for me, just like exercise, if I don't do it first thing in the day, then I don't do it. You know what I think, Lani? I applaud the work you're doing trying to get this message out. And I think one of the reasons it's such a
thank you
is like if people come to us with certain diseases and we can give them a whole food plant-based diet and they can recover from these diseases and there's measurable results. So if they have a high A1C or high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, they eat the food and then maybe they lose weight and look and feel better and we can take their blood and say, look, see, you got better. Or if somebody comes with us in a debilitated state, we can prescribe exercise, they can build their muscles. But with this, I think because it's not really measurable, you know what I'm saying? It's like you can't measure, I mean, I guess you could measure your brain waves. I think it's a harder sell to convince people of its efficacy is what I'm saying, Yes.
Well, when people get to a certain point of pain, and they're simply not able to implement over and over again, that can be a driver. And actually, we do have the ability to measure brain waves. I actually have a video I'd like to show presentations, which, by the way, you'll be glad to know, very popularly received. It's been standing room only, and it's like not that I'm so great about this, but that it's a new dimension. It can help us actuate these other things. So there's a video I show with Anderson Cooper, and he did a 60-minute segment on this with John Kabat-Zinn, and actually Judd Brewer is in it too, and they hooked his brain up to electrodes. And he had gone to one of these, a 3-day retreat, very reluctantly gave up his lifeline, his phone. As you can imagine, Anderson Cooper, he's on social media and email all the time. And he learned to do this. Dropping is going to be active, but you can learn to not engage with it and identify with it. You can actually do that. They hooked him up to electrodes, and the experimenter, Dr. Judd Brewer, said, okay, I want you to think of something really stressful. And you could see in the brain waves, it was above the zone, it was all these red lines, which is the stress part of our brain. It measured that. And then he instructed him, now drop into the mindfulness practice. It was just what we talked about, watch the breath, and get some degree of distance between running with every thought. And it flow into that part of your brain where lie stress reduction, calm, equanimity. So you can see it. So we could all go walking around with the electrodes connected. But there is enough science out there, the research, and I put it in the book too. You can see actually graphs, actually changes in the part of the brain. And I understand what you're saying. We don't have an app right here that attached to my head that shows me I'm the zone. But when you said this was the only thing after having, I used another form of meditation for many years before this that did not make a difference, even though I hoped that it would end my food, weight, and eating problem. And it didn't help me get beneath the surface of this and make this kind of habits of thinking. So it gave me a little bit of concentration, and it's probably a system that works for other people. But for me, when I found out about this particular system, and it's non-sectarian, you don't have to believe anything, there's no religion, now we know the science is there. When I saw, gee, this is going to help get beneath, and I knew my ability to go run and eat something, go do this, go do that, usually, having to do with food or obsess about the next diet, that was a kind of a reactivity. So getting beneath the surface of that helped me create that space that just has been so wonderful and instructive.
Wow. Well, our mutual friend Sharon McRae is watching, and she is a big proponent of meditation. Sharon. And she will, I've stayed with her, and she'll wake up earlier. She will not miss a meditation for any reason. She's so committed, and I admire that. In the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, we'll often run these 30-day challenges, and sometimes they're based on like eating a salad every day, or maybe they'll based on getting in movement. And then hundreds of people.
Pragmatic.
I know. Yeah. But when we do the meditation one, it's like, 6 people. It's, and I think part of it, when people eat the standard American diet or a junk food vegan diet with lots of caffeine and alcohol and sugar, I don't think their mind is in a place where they can sit still for 5 minutes, from all the caffeine and stimulants. So I think it's sort of interconnected.
Can be agitating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it talk about that in the Mindful Vegan too, about how we know what we eat, how foods, and this is another feature of combining mindfulness practice with whole food plant-based nutrition. Because, and I mentioned earlier about getting in touch with your natural hunger and fullness signals, what better food is going to physically help you do that than eating whole plant-based foods? Mm-hmm. Because you have all the fiber. And I wanted to, Sharon, I'm so glad you're here today. Sharon wrote a section for the Mindful Vegan book. So just everyone who's got a copy, or when you get your copy, look up and find where Sharon is. She wrote a really nice passage.
Yeah, she's amazing. Does anybody, hello, Lisa. Does anybody have any questions for Lani about meditation or anything to do with her new book, The Mindful Vegan, which I'm assuming you can get on Amazon and any place else?
Yeah, and number one in, of all things, holistic medicine, which I was very happy to see, and also in vegan diets for quite a while into the first part of her release. So I'm very excited about that.
I'm going to put your website up again if anybody wants to get the free downloads of, and so tell us a little bit about the downloads. We have a few minutes left, and if people, because they're free, they can, so why not? Right. Yeah.
Yes, but in the book, in sources, it tells you exactly where to go to those free downloads, because they are a companion to the 30-day plan. So remember, my idea with this, as I said earlier in our conversation, is to give a tool to get started now, not just here's a great idea, maybe I'll do that someday. That's why I put it in a 30-day plan, and that's why I put together the virtual retreat we just completed, and why I made the audio. So that means for every single day, day one instruction is to just practice formally for 1 minute. Right. Day two is 2 minutes. So the audios I put together is day one, I have a 1 minute audio. Day two, a 2 minute audio, and it goes through, it's not like an audio, but it goes instruction that for practice. First few days are now also uploaded into Insight Timer. So if you have the Insight Timer app, you can just do a search for Mindful Vegan or Lani Muelrath. And I think days 1 through 4 up there. So if you don't have a copy of the Mindful Vegan yet, thank you.
I have it. That's what
application.
I'll tell you, as much as I bashed technology, it wasn't until I got Insight Timer with all the bells that I actually was able to meditate.
It's a good year. I know it's a really good use of it. So if someone wants to, if you've ordered your book and you don't have it in yet to tell you where to go and get the audios, then you can use that. But I really want it to be that it's a companion for, so it's an important support system.
Yep. So one last question from Massimo. He is actually watching us live from Italy. That's great. I met him actually at a Hans Deal event. And he says, he says, is it possible to meditate even if you have serious problems keeping your back and spine straight?
Yes, because you mean a sitting position. You can meditation seated in a chair, and I teach this all in the book, in on the floor or lying down. If you have an orthopedic situation that does not allow you to sit upright, you can position yourself lying down, and it's simply, that can be also more conducive to sleep. So you may need more reminders to keep yourself engaged. And for people who also need to keep moving, you aren't able to be still for one reason or another, or maybe you're very easily distracted, you can also do walking meditation, because guess what? When you're walking, you're right here, right now, right? So it's easy for our minds to wander off, but you can bring it into the body. So definitely lying down meditation, and I will do that too. It depends on if I'm somewhere. I've done that lying down in a bunk on a boat when I couldn't get up because the boat was rocking too much, just laying down. So great question. Yeah. I really like to make it simple and easy and accessible. It's the practice of what you're doing with our attention that's important, not all the other. You don't need special places, special tools, special cushions. Just make yourself comfortable and support yourself in whatever way you can.
Nice. Liv wants to know, what do we do on day 31?
day 31, you continue your practice. And if that means that you stay with, I take it up 30 minutes. My personal practice is 45 to 50 minutes every morning.
Wow.
And then I will try to add evening. But I don't want anyone to feel like that's a rule, because as we said earlier, even 5 or 10 minutes in a day is extremely beneficial. It gives you some, it's dose respondent, so it will give you some result. Consistency, as you brought out earlier, most in part. So to go to day 360, do 360 minutes. You can just go on like a 20-minute practice or 15-minute practice daily. And if someday it just doesn't work to fit that in, then let yourself sit or lie down for 5 minutes and let that be a priority for that time. Does that answer the question, Lee?
Nice. Great. Thank you. Well, I can definitely, I've been meditating since September 18th. I have not missed a day. One day got interrupted by a workman. And Sharon says that I'm definitely less of a bitch. So, so I guess it's working. But I wish everybody would just try. You can get the free downloads at LaniMuelrath.com. You can get her book, The Mindful Vegan, on Amazon, as well as her 2 other books, Fit Quickie and The Plant-Based Journey is plant-based journey, but the plant-based journal sounds good. It could go with your plant-based journey.
That sounds good.
Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And Lani, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you
for bringing this important topic to the plant-based movement. Sharon says she's proud of me. Yay. Thank you. Well, you inspired me, Sharon, and you inspire so many people, Lani. Thank you. And thanks all of you for watching another episode. You're welcome. Thank you for watching Healthy Living. I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious. Bye, everyone.
Beautiful, everyone.